Welcome to We the World and our 2025 Manifesting the Dream event. Each year, we take time to remember Martin Luther King Jr. and his beloved community. And each year, we are thrilled to feature the many people and organizations who have taken action to be of service, not only in January and February, but all year round. We at We the World welcome you to take action and be of service at we.net/MLK from January 15th to February 28th. Please join us in being a part of this annual celebration and consider being of service in your communities and with us. Of course, donations are very appreciated at we.net/donate. My name is Jana Larsen, and I am the HR Deputy Director of We the World. Today, we are welcoming A. Marie B. Thomas Brown and Katie Benway. Together, A. Marie and Katie illuminate the interplay between breath, transition, and transformation, helping us navigate life's inevitable final event and discover exactly what we believe in, stand for, and live for. A. Marie B. Thomas Brown is a conduit for peace, unity, and love, devoted to uncovering the hidden treasures within diverse cultures and communities. Their journey has taken them across North and Central America, the Middle East, Africa, the Caribbean, and the West Indies, all while being rooted in Atlanta, Georgia. As an author, speaker, healer, and guide, Amory published The Reformation of a Nation, the United States of Remembrance, offering a profound response to the spiritual unrest intensified by the global pandemic. Through the power of breath, stillness, and remembrance, they invite others into deeper awareness and healing. Amory embodies healing and presence in many roles, including writer, speaker, doula, Reiki practitioner, caregiver, and friend. Their work is a sacred calling to nurture, uplift, and reconnect individuals with the essence of their spirit. Katie Benway is a mystic, certified life coach, speaker, and author who has guided over 11,000 individuals through grief, trauma, and transformation. Founder of Intrepid 11, she offers deep soul coaching, workshops, retreats, and self awareness programs. Her book, Ignite Your Intrepid Soul, a courageous home for your human heart, became an Amazon bestseller, inspiring readers to explore their human experiences through a spiritual lens. A sought after speaker, she has led discussions on conscious parenting, grief, and soul exploration, and has appeared on various spiritual podcasts. A former marketing professional and dedicated community leader in New Hampshire, Katie co founded and led organizations like the Manchester Young Professionals Network and the YWCA of Greater Manchester. A proud mother of two, she is currently working on her second book. For both of you, we are going to, instead of doing presentations about yourselves, we're going to do a question and answer kind of thing. And I have some questions to help guide me so I don't get off track like I tend to do. And so we will start with that premise, and we will hope that we can have a nice, wonderful interchange of ideas and ideas that come forth from this. And so I will start with a question for both of you at first to start with, and give you each a chance, and then we'll go to each of you. But if you decide like, "Oh, I got to ask her more about that," you go right ahead. Okay, here's our first one. How does embracing life's paradoxes, birth and death, presence and loss, help us find deeper meaning and resilience? Marie, would you like to go first?
Sure. understanding that we all have this same beginning. We come in here with a breath to this third dimension, and we leave here with a breath out of this third dimension. Um, it's a understood, even though we may not be aware of it, that we can touch this place. Sometimes we find it or reconnect with it through our own experience, or we're led to it through someone else. But the beauty in this connection is that we all come back to this connection. We all are able to tap this connection because we are that. That we are seeking is seeking us, and that we're always in connection with what we are seeking. And so, us recentering, for me, us recentering into that connection, be it through being guided or through an experience we have in our life, we happen upon it when we happen upon it. And I'm of the mind that it happens for all of us.
You know, I wanted to just add to that. My mother died a little over a year ago, and it was really actually a very beautiful experience because for the first time in many, many years, we were all able to be with her in her room, her hospital room. She suffered a aortic dissection where the wall tore, and she could either be airlifted to Denver and go through all sorts of horrible things, or she could decide that she just wanted to be in peace and no pain, and then we could all be with her by phone, and there was a minister there. And and as the day progressed, it was a long day, and as her breath became more labored, um, I mean, at first, out with the palliative care, she sounded just like herself. You know, it's just like, "Come on, mom, you can just get up and go home." You know, because your breath is fine, you sound good. You know, but as she became more labored, and and then there was the really beautiful care there that the nurses gave my mom so she could have it dignified, and they were very good about working with us. And then as that last breath was breathed, I don't know if that's a word, verb tense, but it was really something. I'll never forget it.
That's beautiful. And, I think about spiritual masters and teachers who, since the beginning of life, have talked about paradox. And a lot of those teachers will say that our greatest lessons are paradoxes, the holding of two competing truths. And I think that death and this experience you're recounting, Jana, and the emotion that comes with that, the sacredness of witnessing that moment of two competing truths, the here, the physical with the mystery, the unknown. And we can have the deepest of faith, and yet it is still an unknown when we pass, when our loved ones pass. I think so much about what spiritual masters teach us about holding paradox. And I think of it as courageous. I think it requires emotional stamina, right? To sit in two competing truths at once. I am a human in a physical form, in a human body, lured by the illusion that this is all there is. And yet I know with every breath and heartbeat that there is more. I need more. And I don't always have proof of it. I think it takes emotional stamina to be in that space of paradox, right? Whether there's suffering or grief or confusion, unknown, and then there's courage that gets built in deeply knowing and deeply living from that place of knowing, and then being okay with. And I know, Amory, we talked about you standing on this line just as I do between life or death, being okay with that, being okay that at times life, our human life, is going to bring us to places where we have one foot here and one foot there.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't say it right now. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of overcome because I was just thinking about everything. Because here I wasn't physically there, I was virtually there. And yet I felt like I was there.
Mm.
Um, I couldn't see, but seeing wasn't what I needed to do. It was about feeling, and really what it is. I mean, what makes us sad is because we aren't going to be able to be with them in the sense that we've been with them before. But um, for me, for my belief system, it's um, it's like a bon voyage. It's just departing to another place,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and that helps me. But not everybody sees it that way. So that must be kind of hard as a death doula when maybe you don't really know what their belief system is and how to comfort. So
And see, for me, in that case, Yana, because I hold the tension between that space, and I'm aware that some of us, we hold this physical place as it, and that we maybe have lost touch with the infinite side, that I can still sit in that space of knowing that Katie spoke to. I can sit in that place of knowing and still sit in a place of comfort for those who have a sense that this is it, or in your case, I'm not going to ever see you in this form again. And so it's a very vicarious place to sit and witness and observe and also help hold a space. But I've learned, and to your point, it was difficult in the beginning because it's like you can so feel both sides. But I look at it as an honor to be able to sit in that space and hold the tension between these two worlds, and know that that place in between is calm for all of us, no matter which side you find yourself on. That doesn't change, and to be able to hold that space and know that all will flow in and through that, it's an honor. It's just an honor.
And what
it's
a gift, Marie, that you do this for people, because I think what you're speaking to, Jana, is there might be people who are entering death afraid, and I mean, and of course, um, and so there might be people who cannot hold that space for themselves, that ultimate supreme crossroads between here, there, what you know, what you don't know, that ultimate moment of surrender. And I think that's really what's beautiful about your work. And I know I do that with folks, not real time. A lot of times it is pre and post a death, um, where we talk about that, like, sort of occupying that space of unknown and all of the feelings that come up with that. But I think that's something that's so beautiful about hospice, or, Jana, you're talking about coming together, and you didn't physically witness it with your eyes, but you felt it, right? And that speaks to that unseen world, that invisibility, that breath, that when it's all stripped away, that's what's true. This idea that when something is true, it sets you free.
Yeah, and you know what? I've been trying to teach her Danish because her father was Danish, and she never really quite got the hang of it. But we always ended all our conversations and our family gatherings with this phrase called "Jeg elsker dig, hi hi." It means "I love you" and "goodbye." And that was
Mm.
the last thing that she said right before, and she couldn't say it clearly, but she was saying it, and it was on her, in her, basically her last breaths, and that was just so meaningful to me.
Mm.
But I think that it's got to be really hard for people like parents to be there at the last moment with children dying. And when we met, I told you about my second daughter who died, and my therapist said, "Were you having a dream?" And you right away go, "Oh yeah." And
Mm.
I told you about it, and you said you were on the other side. You got to see that she was okay, and it was something that you knew about.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that so I have seen people on the other side since I was a kid. And it took me a long time to find my comfort level with it. It was in my
Tell
20s
other
that I
people.
yeah, a lot of and it was scary. I mean, candidly, like growing up, it was scary. It happened a lot in my dream state. And it was in my 20s that I spoke it out loud to a trusted person for the first time. And now I'm 45, and so I've lived with it for a long time. And but sort of as long as I do this work, I will never stop having awe and respect for how hard it is to believe. It is hard. And you might be the most faith-filled, convicted person, but then when you are confronted with profound tragedy, loss, death, grief, it turns you upside down. I always think of grief as like it's got to be cellular, it's got to be visceral. It's like I think it's our cells
Your
mourning.
body hurts. Your
Yes,
heart hurts. Everything
yes.
hurts.
Right. And it turns you upside down. And I mean, I think you can come through this and be steady about your conviction and faith, but it's okay and and it's right that it destabilizes you and that it turns you upside down. That's the point of this stuff. And I think about death as teaching us how to live.
Mm-hmm.
But your experience of when your daughter passed away, you were having a dream. That to me, based upon all of the conversations I've had for 15 years of my life with thousands and thousands of people, that to me indicates that your soul was on the other side. We do that in our dream state, was journeying on the other side, and where you were either part of welcoming her to the other side or at least witnessing. That also indicates to me that your soul knew that this was her path. And that doesn't mean, of course, again, back to paradox, you will as a human suffer with this. That is okay. Even though our souls might be in profound, deep acceptance of a truth, our humanness wrestles with that truth. That's okay. But that you had a dream as your daughter was passing at the same time is a beautiful indication for me that all is well. And that,
And I
yeah,
was
go ahead.
present for her birth, and I was present at her death. I just found
Yes,
that.
yes. Right. Her in and her out, right, Amory?
Yes, absolutely. I say the same thing about my mother because I was there when my mother took her last breath. And I say that she was there when I took my first, and I was there when she took her last, So
Yeah. That's so beautiful.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So Katie, you described life as a series of deaths and rebirths, which we've been talking about. How can we learn to embrace those cycles rather than resist them? Really, you've kind of already answered that, but for people who don't have training, or maybe people who haven't been through extensive therapy like I had been, so I could have some help with coping with that and have a therapist to call right at that moment, who knew the right question to ask me to help make it
Yeah.
all come together for me. How can we learn
Mm.
without? I mean, how can we like tune in and know more?
Yeah. I think of our human experiences as sort of like the movie theater of our soul. Our human experiences are showing us where we need to know our soul.
Yeah,
And a lot of times, most of the times, that's like we get there through suffering. It's just
yeah, painful,
kind of the way that humans learn, right?
right?
Um, and there are situations that are thrust upon us. There's situations that shock us. There's situations that we expected. And what I've really noticed in my work is I think that, and you probably would agree, Marie, is like the one constant about this human experience is is the march of life and death, life and death. It is absolutely a series of deaths and rebirths. Nature teaches us that we are of nature. Nature teaches us to gracefully come into and accept death, to gracefully come into periods of transition, to shine without apology, to be beautiful without apology. And so my
Except
advice,
aging, except aging. I gotta
yes,
look at my beautiful skin.
yes, right. The tree does not apologize for being beautiful. And and you can't make someone has to come in their own way to deeply believing, right? And we all can talk and we have books but there is, I believe, always a place for each human being where something occurs that goes, And
Yeah.
it becomes that union of human with soul. And whatever that is, in nature, in yoga, talking to a psychic, in a meditation practice, whatever that is.
Music.
Yes, absolutely. But my advice is always, if to each person, the more we can deeply accept and then surrender to the fact that life is a series of deaths and rebirths. It is going to happen. And when we are not in alignment with that reality, we cause more suffering. And it doesn't mean you have to feel good, and it doesn't mean you have to be okay with the deaths of life. But if you can acknowledge that this is not thrust upon you, it's not punishment, it's not some condemnation of you, this is a normal part of life that is meant to evolve us. I think that's a really good place to start. I say that with great honor, that there are times when someone experiences the death of a loved one and they're furious, and that is okay. Anger has a part here.
Well, anger is a stage of grief.
Yes. Anger is a purifying alchemical emotion. It will lead you to what is most pure ultimately.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's
I
not
just,
usually your first reaction, first just like shock and
yeah.
stun. And what? I mean, because your whole life has just changed right at that moment.
Yeah.
And as witnesses, for what you each do, I'm sure you have a sense of just knowing exactly what they're going through, and you're just there to just let them just feel it. And when we're little and we are told that we're going to die, or that, what I call that awful prayer that I had to say when I was little, like, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord, I should die before I wake. I hope to. I was just like, I'm not going to fall asleep because I don't want to. I mean, I was
Yeah.
just terrified by that. But you just gradually learn, and if you can just really accept that you have to really realize that your life is a gift in whatever shape or form it is, and that there's a reason you're here on this planet and in this life and with these people and at this time and all that. I think that that's what helps, but not everybody probably really gets that, depending on whatever. Um, all right, I want to ask each of you another question. Marie, what inspired you to guide others in stillness and silence? And how has this transformed your life in ways other than what you've mentioned? Was there an epiphany or?
There was, and I think it started for me back in 96, but I'll say fast forward to 2007, just to give some context. And I was transitioning out of corporate America, and I was starting to take trips out of this country. And it just kind of was in a space when I was feeling like there has to be more to this life experience than this. There has to be more. And if God, if there is a God, if there is a source of all of this, then it should make itself known to me in a tangible way. And that was the beginning of my undoing, because I literally have was reborn. So I like to say that we have a rebirth. And so the life of A. Marie before 2007, I don't even have a memory of it. I honestly do not have a memory, to the place where when I go home to New Jersey and they're recounting events, I honestly cannot put myself there. And it was in this inward search, but this thing that was pulling me on the inside at the same time. It was, I can't even explain it, but I just began to have these tangible experiences that didn't make sense. I mean, I actually saw someone fall in a chair in slow motion. I promise you, it was slow motion. And then a voice would say to me that, spirit is a lot faster, so it has to slow down to come into this dimension. And for the person, they fell normally, but the way I saw it was slow motion. So I began to see that I was existing in these two places at one time. And
Mm.
what kept my sanity, what kept me sane, was my breath. So the way I happened into this work was through my own personal experience, that I know that we all enter this dimension the same, and it's with a breath. And that's where the hiccup, for me, that's where the hiccup in dealing with people, souls that are bringing themselves into union with the two lives. That's where the hiccup comes in, when we we take that breath. But that's also where our salvation is at the same time. That I have found that just in getting people to come to that space, even if it's just for a moment, it's enough to for them to experience, to say there is something more than this. That it doesn't have to be, in my case, having all of these out of body kind of experiences. It's like an out of body experience in your life that I that has caused me to focus on breath, because I say no matter what we go through in this dimension, we all have breath.
Mm.
We all
Mm.
have breath. And somehow in focusing on that, the individual is able to go to their life and their experience, and I am able to witness and help coach them through their experience. My work is just to hold that space that was held for me on the other side, that I get to be here now and hold that space in this physical dimension that was held for me in an intangible dimension. And so it's different for every experience, it's different for every person, but that space is the very same. It's not different.
Yeah. And so, how soon after that did you decide, I know I'll be a death doula?
It's kind of like the kind of thing where I remember singer Maxwell, he had said, they asked him, why did it take him so long to redo an album, do his next album? I think it was almost like 10 years. And he said that the songs had not been lived yet.
Mm.
And so me becoming a death doula was long after I had witnessed many deaths, many births. And it's kind of like why I transitioned into being a breath doula, because I'm actually holding the space of it coming in and going out. But it's the same energy. It's not a different energy. It's just on different sides of the coin, right? And so um, I always like I've come to, my philosophy is that we're here until we go home, and there's only a third of us here. The two-thirds of us is someplace else. We visit it, like Katie said, when we dream, we go to that soul state. And to be able to hold a little bit of that dream in reality, for me to be able to help facilitate that, I think that it's an honor to be able to see that light bulb come on for someone. Because it's almost like I feel less is more. The less I say, the more able you're able to grasp that place that's already, you're already connected to. It's not something you're disconnected from. It's just that this dimension gives us this kind of illusion that somehow it's there when we're there too. And so yeah.
Is there any movie that you've seen that, wow, they really did a good job of kind of showing this emotion, this otherness, this other realm that kind of illustrates it for you? Or that you think that if people saw it, maybe they could take it, watch it, and see, have kind of have an idea, so that it's not scary or awful.
Mm.
If you don't have a movie that in mind, that's okay. But sometimes there was a movie, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was about it was a long time ago. Actually, it was Richard Dreyfuss was in it, and Holly Hunter, and they were firefighters, and he was a pilot, going over the fires and dumping the stuff and everything, and he went through a bad fire and he didn't make it, and then he was on the other side. Then he was, and it was just really interesting because, believe it or not, I kind of feel like they're still around us, and I can't see them, but I feel them, and to know that they're around. But I'm getting off track again.
Let me share something that I shared with A. Marie that might help illustrate, because I was fortunate enough to experience a session of breath work. So I was a breath work provider, and it was a little bit mind-blowing for me because I'm a certified life coach. I'm a talker. People come to me to talk stuff out. It's what I do. So when the prospect of silence, the prospect of breath felt a little bit disorienting for me. And I was in receipt of this session. This was actually a client with whom I have a lovely relationship and I love. And so I was laying on a mat, comfortable, etc. And all she did was remind me to breathe. And let me tell you, I went in, obviously, I think, I talk, I process out loud. I'm that person, right? And I'm laying there and I'm breathing, and all she did was remind me to breathe. Breathe, Katie, breathe. When I tell you what happened, the breath, here's how I describe it, and it is not necessarily like the perfect way to describe it but it's so raw. I saw visions. I had guides visit me. I saw future versions of myself. I felt like I received guidance and information about where I was headed, but I also had experiences that were quite like symbolic. There was almost like a ceremony that was done, and I saw images of myself almost looking like an Incan woman, and I had gold jewelry on. Now, the Katie would be like, "Well, that's probably past life." Like, right? That's kind of what I do. But instead, there's no labeling it in breath. There's no labeling it. There's no narrative. I said some things out loud simply because it felt right to claim them, say them. But otherwise, there was no right or wrong. I was blown away. I was blown away. I got up about an hour later. I mean, it took me like a half hour to even realize what world I was in, and it was all breath. There was no chanting, there were no gongs, there were no singing bowls, there was no invocation of guides. It was all breathing, and all Joanne did was say, "Katie, breathe, breathe, breathe." It is profound. And here's what I want to share also about it. And I think this goes to your work, Marie, especially around life and death, is it's so intimate. And I think what is at times challenging about it, this experience, it is so intimate because you come up against yourself. I think death brings you in, whether you're experiencing death or someone you love is experiencing death, it is so intimate. Everything is stripped away. Birth, um, I have two children. The experience of birth, the stripping away of birth, the sacredness of returning to breath as an anchoring force, an orienting force, a life-giving force. There's so much beauty, power, and sacredness and mystery there. Um, anyway, I just wanted to share that as like a breath experience, and it is wild and mysterious, and yet totally true.
And see, even in my the work I do of remembrance, what I do is I go back to the beginning. So we go back as far as you can remember. So the
Mm.
work I do is around the womb. And so it's like, okay, say you were born in I was born in July. So I'll go back to October of 64, which is when I was conceived, and look at world events that happened around that time to give it something tangible here and to feel into that space and breathe
Yes.
power in that to be able to, because energy just changes forms, it doesn't die. And to
Right.
be able to breathe into that time with a person, it's amazing how a person comes back to their self before they even had a body. A body.
Yes. Yes.
So to your point,
Wow.
it's very powerful work. It's very powerful.
So do you ever find that like maybe you're somewhere and that energy or whatever that was going on in October of 64 when you were
Mhm.
conceived, do you ever feel like you kind of like find that in other places and you're kind of like, oh, I'm like noticing that? Yeah.
It's for
I don't know if
me.
I'm describing it
Yeah,
well.
you are, because when I had that awakening experience where I was awake and I was out of my body back in 2007, 2008, and I know that I left my body and I'm in this void, and then there's this force that pulls me up and down. It's like I was in two places at one time, and all this brilliant light burst. It's almost like I'm always reminded of all things at all times. So it's like to be in that, I don't know if I'm saying this in a way that you can grasp what I'm saying, Jana?
I can, because I'm a color person, and so that's how I,
So
view.
the brilliance of all of it says that you're here and nowhere at the same time. So
Yeah,
to your point, to be able to, do I get these bursts? I do. And I'm able to recognize it and still be a part of everything at the same time.
it's like you're frozen right there with all of that going on, and then you can like come out of it and look around like, did anybody else see that?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's so powerful.
Yes.
And what I think is so valuable about that, so in some of the work I do, like when I'm doing trauma work with folks, like if they're just in a pattern and they cannot figure out what it's about, we drop into guided meditation and we'll go as far back as the womb or right before incarnation, right before
Mm-hmm.
you agree to come into that body. Well, agreement is different from coming in. So
Yes.
we could go all the way back to the agreement part
Yeah,
and
right.
into the in.
Now we're getting deep.
Yeah. But you take people back here, right? And it's fascinating. I mean, you see other lifetimes, but you also see the like the blueprint of the soul, the sort of unyielding, constant knowledge of the soul. And
This
what
is
I
like the plan for your life. Should
yes,
you choose to accept
yes,
this mission?
yes. And it has helped. I will say, I've worked with countless people for whom, like, so it's the processing of trauma, maybe some difficult parent or family of origin experiences. There can be a profound acceptance and then integration of, oh, my soul knew coming in, this was a rocky road.
And
This
this was
was
what
a
I had
ride.
to experience, and I
Yes,
need to handle it correctly so I
yes.
can learn
And
from it.
and that is the death and the rebirth. So what I would say in those cases with folks is like, yeah, that was a rough childhood, a rough set of parents, a rough circumstance. That brought you to your knees. That was your first death experience. And you keep coming back to life from that. But the value, I just love that you bring this up, Amory, the value of just returning to that soul place to say, oh, we knew, I've got it. I've got everything I need to navigate this and get through this. It's like a factory reset, and it's so great.
That's the word that I was going to say, Katie. It
Oh,
is
that's so
the ultimate reset.
perfect.
It's the
Yeah,
reset.
Back to default, factory setting,
yeah.
I remember I always loved kids and wanted to be a mom, but at the same time I had this extreme fear of having children because not only was like, I'm going to throw up, I'm going to, I might throw up, the pain of birth, but also there was this feeling of like, okay, this is what I got to do. It's like I knew that I would have children that I would lose. But
Mhm.
it was as a process of, instead of thinking like, oh God, I'm being punished and all this. I didn't choose to view it as holier than thou or anything. It's more about being honored and blessed to have known them as long or as short as I did. Because Maureen died inside me. And so I had that, the process of death inside me and what happens with, she wasn't a little perfect little baby when she was born, but that was part of what I had to go through. And yeah, whatever I was trying to say there, but I think I was like
You
agreeing
know,
with you.
you know, the the work that I do, like when I'm going to work with someone, they have to commit for a year, because it takes to about month 9 or 10 for us to really be able to see ourselves differently, right? Because we're so we're used to coming in, getting born, you're a boy, you're a girl, this is your parents, this is your name. But what about the fact that we existed before that, right? And so it takes about 9 months to let that other mind kick in. And
Mm.
so then what happens is, what if you were sent here to be a foundation builder, and then you have a father who's unavailable to you? You feel the abandonment of that, right? We recognize that. We see how it's made you feel and how you've experienced it as a child. How different is that when you see it from your whole place, and that this not having my father available to me allows me to see what that feels like, and to be able to support me in being the foundation or being present for someone else. it's when you're able to see yourself from your whole state and experience the fragmentation of what you come into, that it allows us to bring ourselves back to that peace place in our own way. And it's beautiful when you're able to. It's not easy when you have had a difficult childhood to see, or that this is really working together for my good, because it didn't feel good. But when you go back to the place before you had a body, and the agreements or contracts that we made, and then we can look and see how this has served it eases the pain. But over time, you almost are appreciative of the adversity, because
Yes.
And you
nothing.
can help others through what you've learned, and be able to not just read about it in a book about how to help people who have this whatever. You can know it, and really be able to understand that person and what they're going through. So I mean, we could talk for others just about something like that, but I'm gonna have to move on. Hey Maria, are you ready for another question?
Yes.
Okay. Let me make sure I didn't already ask this. You speak about remembrance. What does it mean to remember our connection to spirit through breath, more than what you've already said about it? Is there something else you could say about that?
Well, when we come in as babies, we come in and we belly breathe, right?
Hmm.
Breathe from our belly. And as we go on, and this actually happens early on, like before we even taught in our toddlership, we start breathing from our chest, which is a very superficial breath. The only time we breathe as we did as babies is when we're asleep. We breathe from our belly. We don't breathe from our chest for the most part. And so to reacclimate to belly breathing, it's almost like it's a constant reset. It's not easy, like we don't naturally do it. And so it takes time to remember to breathe from your belly. But once you do that, the body says, "Oh, this is what
I'm
we're doing."
doing that right now. I'm perfecting my posture, and I'm
Yeah, but you
I
should
know I'm doing it
breathe
too.
into your belly, like it happens for me naturally. Now I don't breathe from my chest. It's
Mm.
breathing, so it keeps you in this constant calm rhythm. It's almost like a sleep state while you're awake.
Mm, yes.
And so that in itself is a remembrance, like to breathe correct, to breathe yourself back into remembrance of who you really are. Just
And
breathe.
relaxation too,
Yes.
as a baby would be
Yeah.
asleep.
So I call it a baby breath, but they call it deep abdominal breathing. But to breathe through your belly as opposed to breathing here, it's,
Mm.
will bring you back to that connection, um, of our source. And so, um, I just can't say enough about what happens when we focus on our breath and nothing else.
Exactly. Like when you're stressing and you're maybe starting to hyperventilate, or you're getting really upset about something, everybody says, breathe. And it's just like, you're right, because it's like you're just like right here, and you have to breathe and just let it go to your fingers and your toes, and just really think of it going to your eyebrows and your eyelashes and everything. That when I was a preschool teacher and I was teaching, have kids, like they're getting too rambunctious, and light on the floor, turn the light down. Breathe, let the air go to your eyelashes, and they would be like, but, it really helped them kind of like get past, anything that you can do to make things more fun for kids is the way to go, right?
Yeah.
It strikes me too, Amory, as you talk, that deep belly breath is not where the stories and narratives live. It's beyond the stories. It's the stories that cause so much suffering, so much anxiety, and it takes us into a place, and I think that place is intimate. It can be daunting. It's raw. There's truth there. And I just get an image as you were talking about it, as like the stories live up here, and that belly breath is below the stories into what's true. And I do think that's some of that space of emotional and spiritual stamina. Can you sit next to a truth that may be unpleasant, or, right, like accepting that someone is passed, or that you have your own, passage ahead of you? I think there is that spot, but it's so valuable to practice being in there. It's such a worthwhile practice because it is the
Yeah,
way out of suffering.
right. When I do, I'm a Reiki person too, and I learned as a result of all this trauma that I went through, I had some was able to get really good therapy, and I learned about aura cleansing, and and of course, growing up in Boulder, I had to learn Swedish massage and all these things, and then when I'm using it to kind of like help myself and to help friends because I I I I think I was born to do Reiki because it came so naturally. But other things that I've watched, for like therapy techniques, about tapping and where to tap and just like around the throat and then just like, the chakras here, when you get into your meridian, there's a way to just like do this finger eight movement over like the left side of your body. And anyway, where was I going with that? It was about breath, but so it's all related. I hope that made sense.
It
um
is all related, and it doesn't matter what technique we use, what tools
yes,
we use.
right.
It's all related to breath. And to what Katie was saying, like sometimes that deep, because my work is so very specific that it works in conjunction with other energy workers and other people who do like therapists and things of that nature, because it can open you up to a very deep place. And I do that work, but not to the extent that someone that's maybe called to do that. But I'm very good, humbly, at getting to the heart of it, right? And some people are able to traverse those waters, but sometimes you need help to tread those waters.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
partnering with other people who do that work where they need to talk, where they need to, and I can still continue to do the work in conjunction with that of being in that constant flow, learning how to stay and abide in that place and not have to be some place that you go in and out of, because
Yeah.
we can do that.
And you bring up a good point. I wanted to acknowledge this, that I think for people listening, like it may sound easy for us. And I want to acknowledge that there is privilege in, like, I have privilege that I've been able to access coaches. And there are circumstances that people are born into, and there is not that. There is not a lifeline, a coach, a therapist, a friendly teacher. There is, I think about addiction and it takes time to come out of that stuff. And so, I think about that. I think about like, my gosh, what if I hadn't had certain privileges, certain access? And and so here's what I would say to that, because I just want to acknowledge that, like, if there's people listening to this saying like, I don't know where to begin, I don't have resources, like I don't have these people, you can begin in simple ways. And I think now with what the way the internet is, there are a lot of beautiful free resources. And acknowledging that, like, you don't have to naturally come to a place where you're thankful for your death experience, where you understand that it was transcendent and transformative. It is totally normal, correct, appropriate. You ought to be in a place where you maybe you're angry, maybe you do feel sorry for yourself. Like, this is all, everything you're feeling is an invitation to feel deeper. And that's what I would say is this isn't like we have it figured out and so we're thankful for the deaths we've experienced. This is like when you are on your knees, when you are deeply unsure that there is a God, when you feel forsaken and lost and alone, those emotions, that crying out, that longing is your soul looking for something to connect to. And again, you can find that in nature or at church or in a spiritual text or in, Amory's videos online or my book. And I would just encourage people to reach out for that, because you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have all the money to go pay X person to do this with you. But your soul is valuable, and your suffering is meant to teach you the intrinsic value of your soul. And if you can reach toward that, even if you can't hold it or you don't know how to hold it, if you can reach toward that, that is a great first step.
Wow, that's so perfect. And because this event is around our MLK event and manifesting the dream, I think that's a perfect place to kind of bring MLK into here, into this discussion, because like you say, not everybody has the resources that we three have been lucky to have, through whether it's fate or luck or awareness that was you know, our plan, our blueprint to do, to be able to use. And what I would wish is that everybody, who's suffering through so much, um, with all the tragedies that are going, that are everywhere, that people can know that they're, no matter what the situation is, if your house is just burned down, or it's been blown away in a hurricane, or just everything is just going wrong in the community, that there are resources around, and probably no one's going to just bring it to you and go, here you are, but they are there, and it is a dream for everybody to be able to have that in some way, shape, or form. And if they don't, that there is someone that can really bring it to them. So I'm looking at the time, and even though I could do this all day, I want to just get some last thoughts from you each about what MLK means to you, and whether or not you use it consciously in your work, how it can relate. So I'll start with you, Amory. Um, MLK described moments of deep reflection, including his mountaintop speech, where he seemed to embrace the fleeting nature of life. How does breath remind us of both our permanence and our lasting impact?
I remember in that speech, he says that I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but we as a people will get to the promised land. The promised land, to me, breath is symbolic of that we all have the ability to touch this place, to touch this space, and it has so much to offer us, and that it's in the adversities, in the resistance. Let me just be clear. What I talk about was in the midst of great loss, great personal loss, losing both of my parents, losing my job, not having a job, and losing my house, having my car repossessed. This is all, I'm traveling in and out of the country, having great difficulty in my personal life with my only child, with my grandchildren. This is in the midst of great loss and struggle that I am finding deep peace. So it reminds me of Dr. King, when he says that the dream of his children being judged on the content of their character, and how adversity shapes character, and how finding our breath, finding that connection has the ability to help buoy us through these troubled waters. It's different for all of us. We all get to it differently. We get to that promised land differently, but we all have the ability to touch that place. And so I would say that in what I do and what I offer, that breath has the power to seed us. Yes, there's other work to do, but breath in and of itself has the power to reset us, reestablish us, and reaffirm us in what we already are.
Katie, do you want to respond to that? Do you have anything to add to that?
So because I know, the question you had prepared for me on this front, the question you were going to
I'm
ask.
going to still ask you that too, but I'm going to
Ask-
see if you want to respond to
Well, and
Eric.
it's related to this, because
Okay.
there's a question that I think you have teed up for me around
Yeah.
Dr. King. Can you actually say it, because it'll pull this?
Yeah, you know what? Let's just do that. Okay. So Dr. Martin Luther King believed that suffering could be redemptive
Yes.
when met with love and understanding. So
Yes.
how can facing death, both physical and existential, help us find deeper meaning and purpose in our struggles?
Yes. Okay, thank you. So Yes, and I'm thinking about it through that lens, right? Because what we all know is that the situations in life that have brought us to our knees, that have been most grievous, that have tested our faith, are inherently redemptive. And that notion that, when I think about Dr. King's idea of suffering being redemptive, I think about, as humans, we need the illusion of beginnings and ends. The universe, there is no beginning and end. There isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But as humans, we need that. And I suggest we embrace that. And here's why. We need the illusion that we could start again. We
Mm-hmm.
need the illusion that tomorrow or Monday or in the new
5 minutes from
year,
now.
yeah, we can start again. And I think as humans, we have all of these stops and starts, and frankly, they're
Yeah.
just like fabricated beginnings and endings.
Yeah.
But they are valuable for us. And because it leads us back to, and this is, I'm inspired by what you were saying, Amory, about this, is I think breath reminds us that we can always begin again. And so when we're in the depths of suffering, that reminder that we can begin again. We are one conversation away from our life changing. We are one reach out away from shifting a perspective. We are reading 2 pages in a book away from going, wait a minute. And I think for most of us here and listening, we can talk about moments in time when we were doing something as a human and suddenly some unseen force came in and we were expanded. And a lot of times that does come in through suffering, not always, but remembering deeply that you can always begin again. And I think that is one of the profound takeaways I've come away with in working with people through death and loss. I also think, and this is important to say, that you may know you need to begin again and you may not be ready to. And so it's okay to say, I need to be not okay for 3 more weeks and then I'll begin again.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay. But I think all of this work that we're talking about teaches us to be forgiving of ourselves.
Mm.
Dr. King invited us to be forgiving of ourselves, invited us to begin again, invited us to love ourselves fiercely enough that we would allow ourselves to be that.
And accept that we're all flawed. I mean, he was flawed. We all have, we all have our flaws, but that doesn't mean that's the end. And it doesn't mean that it's all wrong and we should give up. Every moment is a moment to be a do-over. And, it's just knowing that, like if you, wish you hadn't eaten that whole bag of cookies, and you just think, well, I might as well just, eat a pie now or the whole box of ice cream. But you can just go, the next moment I can just choose to just forgive myself for eating all those cookies. I must have needed it. I didn't. Maybe I didn't, but it's okay. I'm still a good person, and I can go on and do good things. Kind of the
Mhm.
same thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, all of life is teaching us about the patterns that we are behaving in. And every moment we have an opportunity to say, woo, that is a pattern.
Yeah.
I'm curious about choosing something different, right? And right, like life is made up of those moments. I mean, that moment, Amory, that you talk about when, you talk about, grant me my breath, show me my breath. I remember the moment, I write about it in the forward of my book, when I realized what I was supposed to do with the fact that I could see dead people. It was a moment of utterly profound knowing. And we're not special that we've experienced that. It's like just that we've been in our suffering. And so that's what I would offer, is like feeling, being in the suffering, naming it, knowing it, loving yourself, and knowing that the unseen world is always exquisitely loving and reaching out.
And full of opportunity. That's what one word that I've learned is an important word, because I remember when I was going through so much, I was just like lamenting, this and that, and there's this and that. And I was getting some treatment because my body was falling apart. I needed to have my hips replaced, and I was in so much pain, and I'd been in a car accident. And the therapist who was working on doing something, like sensory kind of thing said, Jana, it's think of this, it's opportunity. And I was like, what? Opportunity? Opportunity, it's like I didn't see any opportunity here. It was just like, why aren't you, just commiserating with me about how bad things are, but her just saying that, it's opportunity. And I go, that was like more than 10 years ago, and I still think of it. And so that I feel like I can give advice to people who go, oh, this, that, especially with my kids, I can go, opportunity, you know, opportunity.
Mhm.
Anyway, on that note, first of all, I want to say, are there any words of profound significance that you guys would like to end with? Also, I should say, well, we'll do our best for social media and such to let the world know about you. But is there anything you would like to say right now to how to get a hold of you or anything?
Well, oh,
You go ahead, Amory. You go.
no, okay. It'll be quick and short. I am on social media at Facebook. You can find me on Amory B. Thomas Brown there, and through Poetically Speaking, Many Voices, One Breath. And I can be emailed at N as in Nancy, R as in Richard, P as in Paul, I as in Igloo, E as in Edward, C as in Cat, E as in Edward at gmail.com. It's at gmail.com.
Beautiful. And
Thank
so my business name is Intrepid, INTREPID 11 spelled out. And so you can find that on Instagram, Facebook. My website is that intrepid11.com or katiebenway.com. And you can email me at katie@intrepid11.com.
Well, I hope you will get responses from this, because this has been a fascinating discussion, and I was very excited to be able to have it with you. And I think we've learned a lot. So I really thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
So thank you to Brigitte Ben Ali, our events director, who's put together a fantastic event, and we've only just begun. And she's my tech person for today. Thank you to Marie and Katie, my new best friends. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you for joining our broadcast today. Remember, please join us and take action to be of service at we.net/MLK. And of course, donations are gratefully appreciated and accepted at we.net/donate. Goodbye from all of us at We the World.